this for now. I'm going to have to do another practice live stream tomorrow. Just see if I can get this figured out, do a little bit of more research. You know, it's really funny when it comes to things like Greek and Hebrew and Bible doctrine and discernment. I feel like I can compete with anybody on the planet. But when it comes to dealing with computers and dealing with my phone, dealing with stuff like that, I feel like I'm the dunce in the class. And just, it's embarrassing for me to try and use this stuff. And every time I have to learn something new on my phone or on my computer, I end up feeling like a perfect idiot. I guess maybe it's just because it's probably true. But I guess we all have our gifts and calls, and the more I go deeper into the work of the Lord, the more I appreciate people who are tech savvy. You are a true blessing to the body of Christ, whether you're tech savvy with cameras or software or computer hardware or editing or using the cell phones and shooting little videos for Instagram. Anybody that can do that kind of stuff, you people are all jewels and gems. Well, anyway, let's move into the prophetic update here. The first point that I wanted to talk about tonight is actually BRICS. Now, BRICS has created quite a stir for the last year or two. Some people have even considered that maybe BRICS is going to end up being the 10 toes of the last days beast empire. And myself, I'm very skeptical of that. And I'll just tell you basically why. Because the BRICS is built up of the biggest bodies in it are Russia and China. Russia started BRICS in 2009. It was a concerted effort to be an asymmetric warfare effort against America's global economic leadership, against America's global hegemony. And Russia wanted to put a dent in that. So it started to grow when you had other nations like South Africa and China join. And it really became, in many ways, a growing economic powerhouse, a growing military powerhouse. Well, today, for all practical purposes, China is the de facto head of of the BRICS organization. And the whole BRICS organization is able to funnel a tremendous amount of economic and military support towards Russia for her war in Ukraine, a war that everybody understands is really a proxy war with the West, with NATO, with the EU, and with America. Now, what BRICS is the opposition to the Roman Empire, the beast empire of the last days, the 10 toes. This is the fractured Roman Empire. If you picture in your mind the Roman Empire that we see in Daniel chapter 2, and that the legs of iron, it goes from the hips and the buttocks into 2 legs of iron. And then it goes into feet that are made up of iron and clay. And so here we see the historical division of the Roman Empire into the eastern half and the western half. And then we see those halves fracturing. And that's where we're at today. We're in the era of the fractured Roman Empire. Some of the toes are iron, some of the toes are clay, and some of the toes are a mixture of iron and clay. The iron and clay do not mix. Right now we see that Europe doesn't mix very well into the Middle East, and we see that a lot of the Middle Eastern peoples, they don't mix very well into Europe. There's all kinds of culture clashes and religious classes and political understanding the clashes between the way that they like to run things politically. So you have this fractured Roman Empire that's been dominating the world. It's been the domination of Europe proper and the domination of some of Europe's colonies. Australia, Canada, New Zealand, America, we're all former colonies of the fractured Roman Empire in Europe. So it's been this group of the former colonies and Europe proper that's dominated the world for over 100 years. We probably dominated it for 120 years now, since right around the era of World War I. Now, you have the BRICS organization coming up, and they want to challenge the global hegemony of this fractured Roman Empire. And that's the titanic battle that we see going on right now. And it's the fact of this battle is why I look at BRICS not as the beast empire of the last days, but just one more expression of the northern hordes and the barbarian hordes challenging. Well, they challenged the Roman Empire 4 times. They sacked Rome 4 times. Prior to that, they fought the Greeks over and over again. Prior to that, they fought the Persians over and over. And prior to that, they fought the Babylonians. And prior to that, they fought the Egyptians and they fought the Assyrians. So you have these northern hordes and the northeastern hordes continually being a problem, a thorn in the flesh for those basically for the superpowers, for the empires that God has given the control of the Middle East. We live in the times of the Gentiles. Now, so when the dust settles on this, from the first phase, we're going to see what looks like the rise of the BRICS group. We're going to see the rise of Russia as a world power. She is going to look in the short run like she's cleaning things up in Europe and moving towards the Middle East. It's going to dominate the Middle East, and it's going to look pretty good for the BRICS group for a while. But we're going to face a couple problems in this picture. One of the problems that we are going to face, and well, it's not we the church, but we the church in our understanding, we're going to see Russia and all of our allies destroyed by fire from heaven, a judgment from God. This is what we see in Psalm 83 for the Arab nations. This is what we see in Ezekiel 38 and 39 for all those nations that are descended from Japheth, that are associated with the northern horde. And some of them stayed Japhetically pure up north, or largely Japhetically pure, and some of them moved down into the Middle East and in North Africa and mingled with the locals and became their own empires down there. That's what Persia is. Persis was a brother of Helen, who was the founder of the Greek Empire. Greece mingled with a lot of the northern people, and a few of the Mediterranean peoples became the modern Greek nation. But Persis, or Persia, mingled a lot with the people of the steppes and many of the people in that region of Asia, and with some peoples from the Middle East, and they became the modern Persian people. But both descended originally from the sons of Japheth, Helen, and Persis. Now, so you have all these nations that are part of the Russian hegemony that's trying to rise. That's, in the bigger picture, it's the BRICS empire that's trying to rise, and it's going to be broken by an act of God. That's going to leave the Roman Empire standing alone as the only major power player left to dominate Europe, to dominate, basically Western Asia, to dominate the Middle East, and to dominate North Africa. So when you come to the place where all that's left is the fractured Roman Empire, that's when the Roman Empire is going to come together. And when they come together, they're going to dominate the world. Now, perhaps the world is going to be divided up into 10 pieces along the lines of the UN program. But if this happens, in my mind, I don't see this being the UN dominating Europe. I see this being Europe dominating and using and exploiting the UN. So I flip that from the way that some people look at it. Now, at any rate, what we're looking at with BRICS right now, as of January this year, some new nations have been added. Argentina backed out, led by Javier Milei. He's decided, nope, we're not going to put Argentina in BRICS. We don't want to be part of that. We actually favor Israel. We favor America. We favor Europe. that's who we identify with. This is not surprising in many ways, as it's pretty common knowledge that Argentina is the most European of all the South American nations. Now, new nations were added this year. Iran was added, Saudi Arabia was added, the United Arab Emirates was added, Egypt was added, Ethiopia was added, so we added 5 new nations. Now, what's interesting here, Iran is part of that triad that's Turkey, Russia, and Iran that's going to be leading up the Gog and Magog juggernaut, and they're all pretty strong, relatively strong economically and relatively strong militarily. Put them together, and that's actually quite the military colossus. Now, even together, they don't have the naval power of America, and they don't have the air power of America, but they sure have a lot of equipment on the ground and a lot of manpower on the ground. And that's going to be a ground and pound situation in the Middle East if that situation ever arises. Now, what's interesting here is with the 4 of these nations, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Ethiopia, we're looking at nations that are Middle Eastern or Northern African nations, nations that historically were part of at least some of them were part of the Roman Empire, maybe only half of that region, maybe 2/3 of some of this region, but it was in the Roman Empire. Now, what's interesting about this is right now these Middle Eastern and North African nations are in a colossal tug-of-war between the fractured Roman Empire and the nations trying to come together to form the BRICS Empire. And so this tug-of-war is pulling back and forth, folks, and it's contending for domination of the Middle East and for North Africa. They want to dominate petroleum. They want to dominate the minerals. They want to dominate the metals. Africa is mineral and metal wealthy. The Middle East is petroleum wealthy, and there's also some minerals there too. So this tug-of-war in the short run is going to look like the BRICS is coming up on top. But once the Lord deals with and judges BRICS, then I see something's going on here. I got a message that somebody subscribed. I'm not sure what that's talking about, but I'm going to have to turn that off, I think. At any rate, in this tug-of-war, it's going to look in the short run like Russia and BRICS is going to win, but in the long run, they're going to be crushed by the Lord, and the Lord is going to allow the revitalized and reconstituted Roman Empire to dominate the Middle East, and then they're going to be judged by God too. So just watch for this tug-of-war. This tug-of-war between BRICS and the West is going to continue in Africa and the Middle East. And I'm very thankful that Javier Milei is aligned with the West rather than the BRICS Empire. Hopefully this will be a great blessing to South America and to Israel. Well, let's move on to the next point I want to talk about, and that's the presidential primaries. Now, some people might say, well, how is American politics related to Bible prophecy? Well, let me just put it from this angle. No matter whether America stays in power like I think she will, or whether she descends into being a second-rate nation like many people think she will, she's ultimately going to be somehow absorbed into the Roman Empire. There's no way that the restored Roman Empire is not going to want to have access to American capital, the American military, and the American, our minerals and our resources and our people. This is a tremendous asset to have at your fingertips. So when I look at what's going on in the Roman Empire of the last days, in my mind, I see America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand part of that. Exactly what part? Well, that's another question. But that they are colonies of that fractured Roman Empire, and I think that's where our identity has been for the last 200 years, and that's where our identity probably will be in the last days. And whether we go limping in there as second-rate nations or whether we go crawling in there as nations that got battered by a nuclear war, whatever happens, that's where we're going. Now, what's interesting with the American primaries here, when you look at what's going on right now in the Republican primaries, Trump just trounced everybody else in Iowa. And what it's looking like right now for the New Hampshire primaries, it looks like he's going to win by double digits there. If he does, it's pretty much over for anyone else that even wants to consider being a Republican candidate. But here's what's interesting about this. I distinctly remember about a year ago when things were looking really ugly for Trump. And a lot of people said, hey, Donald Trump, he's done. He's toast. He'll never be involved in politics again. He'll never be the Republican nominee. He's not going to be president again. He's probably going to be going to jail. They're going to take his wealth from him. He's a nobody. And, well, I'm not a great Donald Trump fan myself. Personally, I don't think he's a true conservative. I'm not convinced he's a true born-again Christian. He is a patriot. There's no doubt about it. And as far as economics go, as far as American military goes, as far as border control goes, he definitely has America's best interest in stake. However, it is very interesting to me that his last cabinet was stacked with New World Order people. It probably will be again. So there's an interesting issue going on here. Is Donald Trump really a wild card that the New World Order is trying to control? Or is Donald Trump really like a closet agent for the New World Order? You know, folks, I don't really know. Not sure that I really care, but I just think when we look at the political scene here, we need to keep all the options on the table as we're looking to discern how we should respond in the future. Now, as far as the election goes, I'm not going to be surprised if Donald Trump wins the election and he's president again. I'm not going to be surprised if we see a lot of chaos in the election again, some electioneering, and he's not president again. I won't be surprised either way. Things like this just no longer surprise me. But I can tell you this, no matter what happens in the future, in American politics, no matter what happens in this election, the World Economic Forum, the New World Order power players, they're even broader than the World Economic Forum. They had their hand in this. And this doesn't matter if we have another president from the far left, whether it's Biden or somebody else. It doesn't matter if Donald Trump comes in and he truly is a wild horse that the World Economic people and the New World Order are trying to control, and they can only half control or 1/3 control. It doesn't matter. They will try and get him into control. And then the third option is that maybe he really is truly of a New World Order mindset, but he is of the opinion that he wants America to dominate the New World Order. He doesn't want America to be dominated by anybody else. He wants America to dominate. So those are one of the three things that we could see in the future. I'm not going to predict the future, although I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he does come out on top. That's my gut feeling, but that's just a gut feeling, folks. I'm not sure if it even qualifies fully for discernment. So as I was saying anyways, it doesn't really matter who comes out on top. We are going to know, we can trust that if the New World Order didn't orchestrate that, they are definitely got the pieces in place to control damage, to control the situation, and steer that situation where they want things to go. That's what we're dealing with right now in the world. Now, when we come to the Democratic primaries, of course, they haven't had any final results for any states right now, but the polling that they do have up to this point shows Biden leading his virtually unknown challengers. But we also have the wild card here, which is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's running on the independents, and we really don't know how that's going to affect the upcoming election. Now, what's interesting about this is some people think that they're afraid. They think he's going to draw more votes from Donald Trump than he's going to draw from Biden. Personally, I don't think that's the case. I think he's probably going to draw more votes from Biden and going to ultimately end up, or the far left camp anyway, and ultimately help the Republicans. But either way, folks, I don't really regard myself as a Republican. I don't regard myself as an independent. I vote for the Jesus Party, and since we don't have a Jesus Party, I just vote for whichever candidate that I think is going to most likely prolong our freedom the longest. So that's the end of my thoughts here on the political situation. I do think that no matter who comes into power, we're still going to be drifting towards the orbit of the New World Order, and we're either going to be drifting from an American leading position or drifting from a position where America's leading and that needs to be controlled, or whether we're going to be controlled right from the get-go. Whatever happens, we're heading towards the New World Order. Now, another story that's really caught my attention is dealing with euthanasia. I saw a story today quoted from the Iona Institute that the Irish Medical Council has lifted the ban on doctors deliberately killing patients. Now, this is interesting because historically, the medical associations and the medical councils around the world, originally from the Western Hemisphere and Europe, eventually spreading to every nation that was influenced by that, they follow some version of the Hippocratic Creed. Now, the Hippocratic Creed stems all the way back to Hippocrates, who wasn't the first doctor in ancient Greece, but he was probably the most well-known doctor in ancient Greece. And he had a principle that's become famous: do thy patients no harm. Well, so all these medical professions and medical creeds for all these years have insisted that medical doctors cannot deliberately kill a patient. That's just been taboo. It's been banned. Now, they have that stated. So, for instance, the Irish Medical Council had a line that said, you must not take part in the deliberate killing of a patient. And this line was recently deleted. This is a pretty convenient thing. Now, this is going to open the door for doctors being able to do euthanasia and not have to worry about legal repercussions. It's a pretty scary scenario. And it's my understanding that this decision was forced by the global cabal and the deep state in Ireland onto the Irish Medical Council. And the doctors themselves had no say in this. They didn't even know what was going on until it's a fact. So it's interesting, folks, that not only do we live in the time of cancel culture, we obviously live in the time of cancel morality. Now, here's another story that really caught my attention, and that's comes from the World Economic Forum meeting this year in Davos, which was January 15th to January 19th. And one of the things that become a firestorm story coming out of there was that Jojo Maida went off on her little tirade against farming and agriculture and energy production. Now, this world is going so topsy-turvy. I mean, when I was younger and they were going against mining, but they were coming at it from the angle of, we need to do safe mining. We don't want to be doing mining that can pollute the world. You know, that was justifiable. That was a good position. If we have to choose between making mega profits and doing some damage to the local environment and leaching garbage into the local water system, or to make significantly smaller profits, but still make a profit and not leach, poisons and stuff into the local water system, then we should actually protect the environment and make lower profits. I mean, this is just common sense. We don't want to be pursuing capitalism at the expense of the environment. So that makes sense, but you come to the modern day, and it's like mining intrinsically is wrong. Going after energy intrinsically is wrong. And it's not just they don't want to burn coal and they don't want to burn oil, they don't want to burn natural gas, and they don't want to burn propane. They don't want to burn anything. Well, if we don't burn something, how are you going to live in the northern regions? If you don't burn something, how are you going to have air conditioning in the really hot regions? Something has to be burned to produce energy. That's just the way it works. And if you don't burn something, you have to capitalize on something that's moving, like water, so that you can transfer that moving energy in the water to moving energy that you can turn into electricity, or that you can turn it into like grinding grain with the millstone. But somehow you either have to burn something or you have to utilize your water. Well, they don't want to use the water either. They don't want to have dams that can generate electricity. So we're running into all kinds of problems, but it goes completely cuckoo when they want to go against eating meat. They want to go against dairy. And when they first came out with that, I said, oh, I didn't think it was right. But you could see how people could be duped into believing it was right. But now they're going to we don't want farming. No, wait a minute. What are we going to eat? If we're not going to eat meat, where are we going to get our protein? Oh, we're going to get it from eating beans and the different other vegetation that we can get our proteins from. And if you mix the right legumes and the right nuts and stuff, you can get a full protein. Okay. But now what do we do if they ban farming? Now, where are you going to get your legumes? Where are you going to get your nuts? Where are you going to get your protein? Oh, here's the solution. All the big dogs in the world, they still get to eat meat. They're going to have their own little organic farms, and they're going to have their own little organic beef ranches, and they're still going to get their good food. Oh, but all the rest of you poor people, we're going to feed you bugs and algae goo. And if you starve to death or get sick, we don't really care, because, to be honest, we want to lose about 7,500,000,000 people on this planet. So we only want about 500 million here. And we probably go even lower, but we need some people to be like our serfs and be our slaves and make this planet go. So at any rate, this opposition to farming, to opposition to fish farming, and opposition to farming, and opposition to logging, and opposition to agriculture and energy production, this stuff is just going absolute bonkers. It's absolute bananas. And what's really funny is 20 years ago, the left was up in arms about logging in the Amazon. If you log the Amazon, that's the lungs of the planet. Now you're going to destroy the earth. And all of a sudden these people have flip-flopped. Oh, we have to log half of the Amazon, but we can't use that timber for anything. We can't use the wood. No, we have to bury the wood, because we need to get rid of all that extra carbon. Folks, if that isn't the most brain-dead idea that I have ever heard, it's going to be the second most brain-dead idea that I ever heard. I start to blow smoke out my ears when I see this kind of stuff going on and hear this kind of stuff. You know, when we get to heaven, the thing that's going to be missing, that I'm going to enjoy missing the most, is that we're not going to be around stupid any longer. Oh man, do I look forward to that. Well, here's another issue that's I've been thinking about quite a bit lately, and that's that this whole situation with Israel. They've made a tremendous amount of ground in Gaza, but there's two pressures, political pressures, that are building on Israel right now. The first one is that the West, particularly America and the Biden administration, are pushing Israel to wind down the Gaza operation. Don't get yourself embroiled on the northern border in Lebanon with Hezbollah, and come to a two-state solution for the Palestinians. Now, Netanyahu is balking at the two-state solution. I don't blame him. He's right. There's nothing good can come out of a two-state solution. There's another pressure that's working on Israel, though, as far as the war goes. And that's that Israel is discovering that the Hamas problem was vaster in Gaza than they thought. That there's probably 50% more, at this point, the count is like 50% more miles of tunnels than they had thought. There's a lot more weaponry there than they thought. And the percentage of people that's involved in Hamas is higher than originally anticipated. So the whole idea of actually being able to completely eradicate Hamas, noble ambition, but prescient minds are beginning to realize they're going to have to manage their expectations. They're going to have to balance their expectations, because to actually rid every last Hamas member out is probably impossible. To find every last cache of weapons is probably impossible. And the odds are that they're probably not even going to uncover every tunnel. That's just what they're dealing with. Now, and that's not even talking about the Hezbollah situation up north, which is even a more potent enemy than Hamas. So with these kind of political pressures now bearing down on Israel, going to be very interesting to see what happens in the future. Because if the West starts to hedge on economic support and military support, unless Israel winds the wars down and starts heading towards a two-state solution, it's going to get ugly over there in a hurry, because Israel's going to be left out to dry. And we ultimately know that's what's going to happen, because when it's all said and done, Israel will be all alone. She will have no allies. And it's everybody against Israel. And she will be in a place where she is forced to call upon the living God. Well, here's a couple technology developments that have come into existence recently. Very fascinating. It tells us the direction the technology in the world is going. It shows us how fast technology is advancing, and it shows you the potential for the future. Of course, now, when we're looking at the potential for the future here in this world, it's all a dystopian potential, because you can take it to the bank. You can take it to any bank on the planet. That the technology breakthroughs that we're having right now are going to be exploited 1,000 times more for evil than they're going to be exploited for good. You want to exploit technology for good, I hate to break the bad news to you, but a lot of this technology, to exploit it for good, we're going to have to wait until the rapture and end the kingdom. Now, one of the things I'm looking at is quantum computing breakthroughs. Right now, we have some huge breakthroughs in AI. You're watching AI every 6 months get vastly stronger in its abilities just on the consumer level. And what they have at the government level, the military level, believe me, folks, they're at least a decade ahead of us on the consumer level. They're way, way out there. Now, one of the shortcomings for being able to exploit AI is that you need a vast amount of power to use AI to its full advantage. Right now, to run massive computer farms, supercomputer farms, especially if you're going to go, they take a ton of energy. Now, if you want to go to the quantum computing level, right now, you can only run these large quantum computers in a special computer room that's running at they're trying to get it to near to absolute zero as they can. That's the temperature range you have to have for quantum computing to work in its most stable way. But now at the University of Texas, El Paso, a professor there, I can't pronounce his name exactly right. It's an Arabic name, something like Ahmed El-Gendi, or maybe it's Ahmed El-Hendi. But anyway, this gentleman has been a lead scientist really in developing a quantum computing material that can operate at room temperature. Now, this is huge. If they can actually scale this, if they can actually introduce this into, bring it into production, then you'll no longer have any need for sub-zero, for near absolute zero computing environments. You're talking room temperature environments now. Now you're looking at computers that will be affordable by small government agencies. Every government agency will be able to afford this. Wealthy homeowners will be able to afford the quantum computing. And here's the interesting thing. Quantum computers can run thousands of times faster than the fastest supercomputers on Earth right now. I want you to think about that. Thousands of times faster. And the potential is here for the quantum computers to literally run 1,000,000 times faster than our current supercomputers. I mean, we're talking, this is insane speed. My mind can hardly wrap around this. Now, the breakthrough material that they're using for this quantum computing is some kind of a aminoferricene, which is like you're talking amino family with ferric is iron. So this is some kind of an iron product that's mixed with graphene. It has magnetic powers that are 100 times stronger than a regular iron magnet. This is way, way stronger than the hard drive magnets that we have right now. The other thing that's interesting is because it can be made in the factory with readily available materials, then this is going to eliminate the need to a large degree for this really planet-raping mining that you need for some of the rare minerals and metals that are used in our current technology. So the advancement potential here is huge because it's going to be relatively inexpensive to make, and it's going to be, it's going to introduce room temperature quantum computing. Now, the last story that I want to talk about tonight is the Chinese. I don't think it's been brought to market yet. They're still working on the product, but they have developed small atomic batteries. Right now they're working on sizes that are about the size of watch batteries, camera batteries. That's the size they're working on. Now, these little batteries, they're using radioactive materials that have a relatively long half-life, and so that they're generating electricity as they break down. You just have a little tiny chunk of this material that breaks down. The lifespan of the battery is 50 years. One little battery. And it produces 10 times the amount of energy that the same sized lithium battery that we have right now produces. So 10 times the energy, and it will last running full capacity for 50 years. That is insane. I mean, when you think about where technology is going, and you think about how it can be exploited by Big Brother government down here, it's really, really ugly. However, if you stop and think about how cool this stuff is and how we might use it in glory, where we're using it for things that glorify God, can you imagine having your camera where the battery lasts 50 years or 100 years or 1,000 years. I mean, that's where this technology is going. I think it's absolutely cool. But at any rate, that's the things I wanted to bring out from current events today. At this point, we can move into the Q&A. If I'm assuming that we have people who have questions that they sent in. So I'm going to pull up here. I'll see if we'll have an email coming in here in a minute. I'm assuming we're going to. But to me, well, I want to thank, let me put it this way. I want to thank everyone that toughed it out the first 20 minutes. I know it was pretty slow going and it's kind of frustrating. I'm glad you all kept a good spirit, and I'm thankful that the Lord helped us out. We didn't get everything we wanted as far as the video and audio goes, but we made a lot of ground. I'm going to have to work on this again tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow morning or tomorrow early afternoon, I'll try and do another live stream. Just who knows what I'll talk about. It'll be something, but just to want to see if I can make everything work the way this needs to work for tomorrow night. All right, Hannelore has sent in the questions. Here's a really, really good question. Do you think the U.S. is like a future Sodom, which is why it's not talked about in the end days? With all that's going on in the country, it feels like it. To be honest, I think all the nations are going to be Sodom nations in the last days. Now, I suspect that some are going to be more that way than others. I mean, when you look around the world right now, Israel has a problem. Europe has a problem. Parts of South America have a problem. America has a serious problem. You know, years ago, Leonard Ravenhill said that if America isn't judged severely, God is going to owe Sodom an apology. And I think he's correct. But now, as far as this question goes, do you think the U.S. is like a future Sodom? And is that why it's not talked about in the last days? Well, I'm not entirely convinced that America is not in the last days in Bible prophecy. I tend to think that we're part of the Roman Empire. I'd be inclined to think that we are the little horn that's the head of the Roman Empire. Many of my comrades, no, they think that's not right. They would look at America as being absorbed into the Roman Empire. It doesn't really matter which way we go here. We're going to be gone, and America is going to be part of the Roman Empire, which means that they're the bad guys. And we'll get to sit up there, drink our Heaven Bucks coffee, and watch things unfold down here, and we'll see which direction turns out to be right. The one thing that's absolutely certain, and Pete Garcia and I talked about this a few weeks back, the America that we knew is history. It's gone. It's not going to come back. We might see in the future what looks to be a little bit of a conservative revival, but when you look at how the right has been drifting left, then any kind of a conservative revival that we have in the future is really kind of a small piece of a bigger picture, and the bigger picture is drifting to the left. I also want to say this. We want to be careful that we don't want to press the argument that America is not mentioned in Bible prophecy too far. There's always a danger in using an argument from silence. Now, you can't say that there's never a place for an argument from silence. The argument from silence is if you're looking at for instance, the argument from the churches that mentioned from Revelation chapter 6 all the way to Revelation chapter 18, you don't see the church on earth. In fact, you don't see the church on earth from Revelation chapter 4, which starts at the rapture. So you've got all those chapters without the church, and you don't have the church mentioned in that time except for in heaven. Now, this is a legitimate argument from silence, because when you would absolutely expect to see the church mentioned, if the church was here and it's not mentioned, that's a legitimate argument from silence. Now, when we come to something like America is not mentioned, it's a little bit harder because you can't mention a nation that's not named. Let me point this out. I mean, most people believe that Russia is part of Bible prophecy. Russia's not actually named anywhere in Bible prophecy. Now, we get the name Russia from Rosh in Ezekiel chapter 38. And Rosh is one of the Scythian tribes that ultimately gave its name to the Russian nation. The tribe of Meshech gave its name to Moscow. The tribe of Tubal gave its name to the city of Tobolsk. And you can see where this is going. But Russia's not mentioned. But here for this matter, the Roman Empire is not mentioned by name. It's described. We have to take a few steps of inference and deduction to come to the conclusion that the fourth beast is the Roman Empire, but it's not named. And so I think the same way, if America is in Bible prophecy, there are things stated that imply America. But America doesn't have to be named because the Roman Empire is not named. So we want to be careful when we use that kind of an argument from silence. All right, for those of us that aren't gifted in ruling, are we going to have different rewards other than ruling over cities? That does not sound too appealing. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, the Lord's not going to assign any of us to a job that we're not interested in. And there's going to be all kinds of jobs in heaven. People are going to be involved in music ministry. People are going to be involved in education ministry. People are going to be involved in law enforcement. There's going to be a lot of different angles for this. Maybe people are going to be agricultural advisors. There's going to be a lot of different government posts. So who knows? Maybe you get to be an art teacher or a music teacher. Should believers pray for very sick Christians to go to heaven instead of euthanasia? Would this be better than being killed by a doctor with the new ban lifted? That might be an option. I mean, I've known a number of people that when they're, whether it's from advanced age or whether it's from advanced cancer or something of that nature, they just come to a point where they say, you know what? I'm reconciled to this. I'm ready to go home and see my Lord. And they just resign themselves to the circumstances. And if they were trying to fight, they might live another month or another couple weeks or another 6 months, who knows? But they just look at it like, you know what? It's a gain for me if I go home. And it might be a wise situation in a few questions or a few instances. Just pray, Lord, if it be your will, take sister so-and-so home or take brother so-and-so home. And that might be a very good way to go. It's definitely worth considering. How long do you think the gap will be between the rapture and the start of the tribulation? Well, I tend to think that the gap is going to be a year or less. In fact, we really only need a few weeks or a few months, depending upon how fast things roll. I wouldn't say it can't be more than a year. I won't say it can't be 2 or 3 years. It could be, but it's more likely to be less than a year. That's just my thinking. When we look at questions like this, we want to look at the analogy of Scripture. We want to look at the precedent of Scripture. And what was the precedent for the last change in dispensation? Now, we'll just assume for the sake of argument, and I might be off a little bit, but just for the sake of argument, we'll assume that the Jewish dispensation ended when the veil was rent at the cross, and that the Christian dispensation started at Pentecost. So that would be 53 days later. You count Pentecost from the first fruits. So we're looking here, 2 months max. So that's the pattern that we see in Scripture. And I'm inclined to think that we're not going to have a significantly different time period between the rapture and the start of the 70th week and the beginning of, technically speaking, the Jewish dispensation. Aren't most of the things that are needed for the one world order already set? Yeah, they're if they're not set perfectly, they're rapidly being set. There's no doubt about that. When it comes to the digital currency, America's not as far along as the New World Order people would like America to be right now. We don't have a digital currency except in an experimental stage on the banking level. It's not fully implemented yet on the banking level. They're looking at fully implementing it sometime in 2025. That timetable could be accelerated, but it could also be slowed down. I mean, we're just going to have to wait and watch it play out. And as far as retail digital currency, right now that's barely on the radar for America. Right now they're focused on getting in the institutional digital currency. Now, once they have that, it probably won't take long to roll out the consumer level digital currency. Certainly they're going to be rolling that. If they don't have that rolled out before the 70th week starts, that will be getting rolled out early in the 70th week. Yes, Lee mentioned the background of Iran, but I've heard they're Semitic, so they're a seriously mixed background. Yes, Iran is a mixed people. The original Persis was Japhetic. He was a descendant of Japheth. And those peoples mingled with the peoples that were already there and became the Persian people. So they're a mixture of Japhetic bloodlines and a mixture of Semitic bloodlines. And there's even a small mixing in some places of Hamitic bloodlines there. Because if you remember, the Babylonian Empire dominated much of that part of the world for a long time too. And there was a lot of Hamitic bloodlines in the Babylonian Empire. What is the best evidence for Daniel written in the 6th century as recorded in the Bible versus the 2nd century as the critics claim? Well, the first thing would simply be that Jesus refers to Daniel as a prophet. Right there, that he would quote Daniel as a prophet implies that Jesus believed he was a historical person. He was not a liar. He was not a deceiver. It's not a work of literature from the Greek Empire eras, from around Antiochus Epiphanes era. No, he's actually who he says he is. He was a literal Hebrew who was in literal. Well, he was a prisoner really, but he was a high official also, and he wrote in the 6th century like it appears that he wrote. So that's just the fact that he's Daniel the prophet. That would be my favorite argument for that. Now, there are good books. I mean, if you want a good book on the subject that goes into all the nuts and bolts, get a copy of Daniel in the Critic's Den. Excellent book. Goes through all the nuts and bolts and all the nitty gritty. Every question that the critics bring up is absolutely destroyed. I mean, they go after the arguments of the Greek words that are found in the Hebrew Bible, in the book of Daniel. They go after the whole debate of Hebrew and Aramaic, and they go after some of the terminology that's used in the Hebrew. And they go after everything, the internal evidence, the archaeological evidence, and the critic's position is absolutely devastated. In fact, that's one of the, if a person is interested in looking at the more technical level of the Bible, the more scientific level, like from the apologetic level, Daniel is a really good place to start, because a ton of work has been done in the book of Daniel. And that case is so crystal clear that you can trust the evangelical position. So if you're interested in that direction, go after it. We need a little bit more of apologetic understanding of the book of Daniel in the current environment. And okay, so we answered the questions here tonight. We've had a relatively short live stream. We only went for an hour and 15 minutes. Again, I want to thank everyone for hanging out with me tonight, helping me have a good time fellowshipping with all you dear believers in the things of the Lord. I want to thank my moderators for helping out tonight. You always are a tremendous blessing. No YouTube Christian ministry could function right without some useful, helpful moderators. So you're a tremendous, tremendous blessing. And thank you for toughing it out with me. I will try and put up another live stream tomorrow afternoon if anyone's interested in helping me experiment once again and helping me prove to my satisfaction and to everybody else's satisfaction that I'm a bumbling idiot when it comes to technology. But we'll get it figured out. The Lord will give grace. And hopefully by tomorrow evening, I will have this figured out completely. So thank you, folks, for showing up. I'm going to sign out now and start doing some homework on how to fix the problems we've had tonight. Take care. God bless. Keep looking up because we are going home soon.